much about why I love brainstorming, all of it, right? It's like, I could just get me a whiteboard, a group of people, we're gone, right? We're going for it. I've always felt like a fairly creative person. And then I got your book and I was like, I've been doing this wrong, right? Like that was my epiphany after reading your book, is I was like, oh my gosh, like I always thought I was a pretty like great idea guy. And then I read your book and thought, I've been doing this the wrong way. Welcome back to Habit Masters. I'm Jeff.
I'm Sheldon.
And today we have a very special guest in Jeremy Utley. Who's that, you ask? Well, he is the co-author of one of my new favorite books, Ideaflow. He is the Director of Executive Education at the D.school at Stanford University, also an adjunct professor there, where he has earned multiple favorite professor distinctions from graduate programs. And you're going to find out why, because he's an awesome guy and he's got so many ideas on how to build a skill of creative problem solving in your life. I've talked about this as maybe the most important skill next to habit building itself. It has become my new obsession and passion. You'll hear that in my voice as we talk to Jeremy. He's going to give you all kinds of tools to start solving problems better in your life.
This is episode 99, folks.
Yes, we're almost to 100. Thank you for listening, all of you. Next is episode 100, and we have a really special one ready for you that's going to be amazing. Without further ado, we introduce Jeremy Utley.
Hey.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
We're doing so well, man. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. It's good to be with you guys.
Hey, apologies. My voice is really crazy today. I've been like sick all weekend. I'm better, but my voice is gone, so I sound kind of weird. But other than that, we're good.
Love it. Love it. All good.
You know, I reached out to you on LinkedIn just because I'm obsessed with your book, man. This is like...
It's a huge compliment. Thank you. I love obsessive readers.
Jeff got it, been loving it, been sharing tons of stuff with me. So I've got it in my Audible on queue, but I promised myself I had to finish at least one of the other 7 books I'm working on before I could start another one. So
Man,
I feel like I kind of know it, how much he talks about it though. So
right on. That's great. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, well, I'm on my third time through it listening. I'm just like, all right, got to really master these. I bought the physical, the digital, and the Audible.
Oh, that's how you know when Jeff's serious, when he buys it all.
I buy all 3.
Very serious. You know, you should get, there's a 4-pack if you haven't seen the 4-pack. I'm kidding.
He's like, there's another one out there. You got this. Cool. Very cool. So I guess really the question comes down to like, did you do accounting? Is that right?
Finance. Yeah, I studied finance in undergrad and was good at it, but I hated it. And, you know, but I didn't think there was anything to that. I thought you always hated what you did. That's why they call it work, right?
Yeah.
And I had never heard of anything different. It wasn't until I was in business school, actually at Stanford, you know, several years later after, you know, kind of somewhat faulty attempts at investment management and strategy consulting. And when I was in business school, I actually was working at a startup in India, in Delhi, India, and got exposed to design there. And
before you go on, like explain people what design is, because they, you know, I've had people ask like, what's the design school? They call it the D.school for short at Stanford, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And so what do they mean by design though? Because it's not what people typically think of.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, design, broadly speaking, being an approach to problems, you know, a human-centered, prototype-driven, you know, inspiration-seeking kind of approach to problems is how I would think about design.
Okay.
So borrowing from kind of a classic designer's toolkit where you're radically focused on the people you're trying to serve, you're creating prototypes, whether it's, you know, physical or experiential interactions in order to kind of learn about what you're trying to do. You're generating loads of options. You're seeking a lot of different input to your thought process. But basically, like if you blur your feet and look at, you know, 50,000 feet, a designer is someone who's trying to come up with ideas.
Love it. That's fantastic. And so I'm sorry, you were talking about, and you were in India, and I cut you off.
No. Yeah, I was in India. I was working at a startup there that had actually come out of the design school, and I was doing business development and things like that, and was really taken by the designers that I saw. I mean, they're designing products down the hallway, and going and living in the slums and living among people who were trying to serve, who lived off the grid, off the electrical grid, who were burning kerosene in their homes, which is very dangerous. And not only because of carcinogens, but also because of fire hazards.
Yeah.
And we were trying to design solutions for them. And that was, design was probably, I thought about it probably as kind of a classic kind of aesthetic consideration, color and things like that.
Yeah.
Where it's right, a very narrow definition as kind of a finance guy. But I started looking at how they're approaching problems and how they're approaching product development and strategy. And I was just fascinated. And so I found myself poking my head in quite a bit, asking questions, and they started saying, you're kind of d-schooly. They didn't mean that as an insult. They meant compliment. And basically what they meant was that my people were over at this institute called the D.school. That's like those are my people, and I didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so when I came back to the business school, or when I came back to Stanford in the fall, this is fall 2008, I just started taking as many classes as I could at the D.school. And I was blown away by an approach to problem solving that felt very natural and intuitive to me, and yet was not something I had been taught. And it was invigorating. And I found something that was challenging and rigorous and all that, but that I really enjoyed. And that was a total game changer for me, was to realize there could be work that was difficult and yet incredibly meaningful and invigorating. And so that was, through call it 2009, was that eye-opening series of experiences. And it culminated in my being invited to be kind of a 1-year faculty in training through what's called the Design Fellows Program. And between 2009, 2010, I was called upon to teach courses and to design programs, not only for, undergrads and grad students, but for doctors and biomedical engineers, and the Gates Foundation and the Hewlett Foundation and Fidelity and all sorts of different places. And I was learning, my joke is I've been learning in public for a long time now,
The best way, in my opinion.
It is. No, it is. Yeah. And so it's, 13 years later, I'm privileged to still continue to be a part of the program and taken different roles and responsibilities along the way, and created different programs and different courses. But the thread kind of throughout all of it is this addiction to the epiphany, this kind of sense of, wow, where did that idea come from? Like, that is so invigorating. And being able to give other people that experience has been a really transformative part of my life.
Well, you may have just pinpointed one of my favorite parts of life with your epiphany moment, right? It explains so much about why I love brainstorming, all of it, right? It's like, I could just get me a whiteboard, a group of people, we're gone, right? We're going for it. I've always felt like a fairly creative person. And then I got your book and I was like, I've been doing this wrong, right? Like that was my epiphany after reading your book, is I was like, oh my gosh, like I always thought I was a pretty like great idea guy. And then I read your book and thought, I've been doing this the wrong way all these years. Right? It was like, it took all these pieces of this puzzle in my brain of like creativity and put them together. I was like, oh my gosh, this totally makes sense now. So it's been super fun reading it, absorbing it, and really trying to figure out how to put it into practice. Because I run a business with my brother. So a little background with us, like Sheldon and I run the podcast together. We've also done several different entrepreneurial ventures along the way, some successful, others not, right?
It's always the case.
It's like many different versions until we landed on this, where we're just like, the thing we really love, it's kind of like you discovered, it's like, well, work can be fun when you love what you do, and we're just super passionate about talking about ideas and helping people like build habits and routines that move them towards their dream. So that's the core purpose of like our podcast, is to help people learn the tools that can move them in the direction of their dreams. And Ideaflow for me, outside of habit building itself, which is such a vital part and vital skill that people really lack, right? They do it all the time, but they don't have like a system for it.
Right. Haphazard.
Right. It's just like they kind of go through, and so they know all these tools, they just haven't put them in a line like you've done with Ideaflow. It's a similar idea. And so I loved it when this came along, because this approach to creative problem solving is super comprehensive. I'm like gushing, right, that I'm getting to talk to you. First of all, it's really cool. But
no, it's an honor. Likewise, it's reciprocal. There's reciprocal gushing. Don't worry. Don't worry.
Well, I'm gonna.
By the way, I hear that a lot, Jeff. I mean, the number of people who go, it's as if, I don't have the book sitting here, but I do have, of course, a roll of duct tape. And it's like, somebody holds up the book. They're like, see, there you go. You got it. I'm not crazy. These guys from Stanford say, and it's as if our people are basically people out there who've got this kind of patchwork, cobbled together set of creative practices that they think are weird or they've got to apologize for. And then we put them together into the system and Ideaflow, and they go, that's what I thought I was crazy, see mom kind of a thing. So
see mom, I love that. Yeah.
We hear that.
See mom.
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Sheldon.
I want to stop you guys because Jeff's talked to me a lot about it, but as of yet, we've talked a lot about the idea of Ideaflow without actually saying what is Ideaflow and this process of creativity for our listeners.
Yes.
Jeremy, I should say. Jeremy, can you kind of like give it, how does, like on your website, demystifying the art of and science of creativity, innovation, and entrepreneurship. Is that Ideaflow?
That's too complicated. Ideaflow is just, it's how many solutions you can generate to a problem in a given amount of time. Very simply.
Okay.
And the more, the better. And how? Exactly. Right. That's the point, right? If you can get somebody to realize more solutions are better, then almost everything, that's the tip that pulls everything along. Well, how do I generate more solutions? And what do I do once I have more solutions? And, all of that kind of follows. But the basic premise and the thing that's fascinating, Sheldon, just to catch you up on, the last 60 years of cognitive science here, is we've known for a long time that the greatest predictor of the quality of one's ideas is actually the quantity of their ideas. And so if you want better ideas, you actually need to be generating more. We've known that for a long time. And more recently, our colleague at Stanford, Bob Sutton, pioneered some great research with his PhD candidate, Andy Harganon, back in the day, where he studied in innovation firms and realized the number of ideas they need to have to get a commercial breakthrough are in the thousands, not in the tens and not in the hundreds, but in the thousands. And we've known that and we've shown that data, but no one's ever said, well, how are we optimizing for that kind of volume? How are we orienting ourselves? How are we operationalizing the even just consider the volume of input required to deliver that kind of conceptual output, right? How do you do that, right? And so Ideaflow is an attempt at describing what's a personal system and practice and routine around generating the volume of outputs that are required to break through.
Yeah, I love it. And it really is, because of all the books I've read, right? And there's been a lot of them on creativity and problem solving and habits and all the stuff that we like to read. This one's the most comprehensive of that realm, right? Of this creative problem solving. And the thing that was broken for me in my process that you guys pointed out so early on in the book, and I was just like, what? It was like this giant light bulb went off right in my head, maybe a small light bulb.
I'm dying to know.
Was the light bulb that went off for me was that I have been judging my ideas far too early in the process, right? I try to refine and perfect, and you go just too far down the road with an idea before you even have enough to know what's what, right? Or to even give it a shot. So that was so vital for me. And it seems like something I should have thought of years ago. And that's always how it feels like when someone shared, you're like, yeah, duh, right? You slap yourself in the forehead. Like, that seems so obvious now.
Right. Totally.
But yeah, so that's been really cool. As I've shared it with people, right? So I've given the book to several of my staff. I've got my ACE team working with me on, like, we're implementing Ideaflow to the nth degree. But I want our listeners to hear it from you. But like I said, hey, this is the most vital skill you can have since habit formation itself, right? That's kind of my tagline for this, is like, Ideaflow, guys. I'm selling this hard. My sister and all the coworkers, team members at my store are like laughing at me every time I bring it up to someone now. But what would you say? So you go into it. I really like this idea because I've been trying to like implement it with my team. I know you've done a lot of these workshops and you've gone in with board meetings and things and got them all on board with, like, here's Ideaflow, you and Perry or whatever team you go in with. What's like the workflow for you guys? How do you get people in the mindset of, okay, we're going to learn how to do this? and get started in this realm?
There's a handful of ways to think about it. One is you've got top down, and there are certain conditions. You can almost think about them as environmental conditions that are necessary and important. But just because you're not the CEO doesn't mean you can't do anything, right? And so then there's also kind of bottom up stuff. And depending on where we're brought in, I think that affects our approach quite a lot. But if you just start from nothing, what you want is you want folks to be in the habit of noticing problems. One of the simplest things you can do is keep a bug list, right? That's one thing we talk about in the book. And that's long before computer programming entered common parlance, right? What we mean is it's an assignment from the 1960s from Stanford. It's keep a list of things that bug you. And, you hear people say, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions. And I would say those people they're not ushering in breakthroughs for sure, because an innovator loves problems and an innovative leader loves people bringing them problems. I mean, and hopefully solutions too, but the notion that I don't like problems or I don't want to hear about problems. I mean, certainly I understand, don't complain, don't gripe, but actually it's a really valuable skill to be on the lookout for problems to be solved and to be observant and aware and in touch with customers and suppliers and employees and stakeholders, right? Cultivating an awareness of problems to be solved is kind of the necessary precondition to generating solutions, right? If I say, come up with a solution, you both go, to what problem, right? So like there's no such thing as a solution where there's no problem. But then when you start to cultivate an awareness to problems, there's loads of opportunities. And when you then kind of, compound that by realizing there's a lot of ways to express any given problem. A lot of different angles and perspectives on any given problem, right? Then you can start to think about how do you tackle it, right? And whose perspective are you taking? And what is the kind of outcome variable that you're measuring? How are you trying to move the needle, right? So I talked to, for example, a restaurateur who's talking about whether a merchandise is a good idea in the store. Like, well, relative to what? Is merchandise a good idea? I mean, I don't know. Like what? And if you say, okay, well, people are walking away. If they learn that there's more than a 30-minute wait, they leave. Okay, right. So the problem to be solved is you want to keep people in the shop instead of leaving. Now, is merchandise a good idea? Well, let's see. Let's compare, the walkaway rate with a store that's got merchandise. And let's compare that with, a discount on appetizers. But then we're clear, right, that in all of these suite of experiments, what we're trying to figure out is what reduces the walkaway rate, right? Well, that's the problem to be solved. So is merchandise a good idea? It's a terrible question. I don't know. A bit, are people cold? That's a totally different problem, right? Right. Yeah. But the point is, if you become aware of problems to be solved, then all of a sudden you start, the thing that's amazing about the weight problem is, there's a million ways to solve that. We could have games in the lobby. We could have people betting on sports that are on the TV in the bar. Right? We can generate tons of ways when we're clear on what problem we're trying to solve. Yeah. And when you ignite a group of people with an awareness of problems to be solved, then you're kind of seeding the soil with the necessary precondition to generating solutions. The other, and I would say just like on the totally other end of the spectrum, but for me, it was triggered by this idea of preconditions. On the totally other end of the spectrum. I don't know if it's organizational or cognitive. I don't even know where to put it. Like you map the spectrum. I don't even know what the spectrum is. But if you think about like a kind of a cognitive model for creativity, is what's known as preparation, incubation, illumination, verification. That's kind of a very standard psychological model. You become aware of a problem, you kind of marinate on it, you gestate, then you have illumination is the light bulb moment, the light bulb that I see in your background.
Yes.
The reason that's associated with ideas is because of the cognitive model of illumination. So that's where light bulb comes from, right? And then you've got verification, which is like proving, oh, that actually works, right? Well, and what triggered this, other end of the spectrum or new dimension, kind of tangent in my mind was I said necessary precondition. And if you think about that cognitive model, I said the necessary precondition to a solution is a problem, right? That's one. But the other, which is kind of in the preparation stage, the other necessary precondition to a solution is incubation. It's time considering the thing. And in our world where we've got so much, emphasis on productivity and efficiency, my observation is incubation gets the short shrift. We don't actually give people time to consider. And one of my favorite studies of creativity of the last, 100 years is from this World War II spy master named Donald McKinnon. I don't know if we were able to write about it in the book. The thing that's interesting about a book,
that
by the way,
doesn't sound familiar.
so a book is this like static piece of, it's like a snapshot of someone's knowledge. But the thing that's weird about what's different about, for people who can see a video, right? In the background, you've got my book and then you've got my head. What's the difference? That is static. This is still moving through time and space, acquiring new information, right? And while that can't be updated, except in second edition or whatever, this is constantly being updated. And I find, by the way, guys, the stories I'm telling right now aren't in the book, because I keep learning.
That's good.
Right?
We love more stories.
But one of the so you'll love this, Jeff. This is like an appendix to Ideaflow, and so you're getting like the bonus chapter. But
nice.
One of the greatest studies of creativity was conducted by this spy master named Donald McKinnon. And what he did was he wanted to understand, after the war, he became obsessed with this question of kind of productive creativity, not just frivolous artistic creativity, which what spy master has time for frivolity, right? But he wanted to know what makes for meaningful, kind of, pragmatic, effective creativity. And what he did was he studied architects. And he said, okay, because they have this balance, so to speak, between aesthetic considerations, but also seismic gravitational forces, right? So it can't just look nice, it's got to really work. And so he
form and function, right? You're talking.
He thought they're the perfect example of like the kind of creativity he wanted to study. So what he did is he conducted this longitudinal anthropological study where he dove deep with who everyone considered. He actually surveyed all living architects at the time, and he figured out who were the most eminent practitioners of the field. And he did anthropological studies with them. He did ethnographic, morning to night, dawn to dusk time with them. And then ostensibly, he didn't tell the other folks. He'd spend time with people who weren't on the short list. I assume he didn't tell them. He's like, just so you know, I'm studying you as the what not to do. Right? But he studied them, and what he found was two big differences. I don't know if you have any. Do you have any guesses on what the two big differences were?
What
do you think, Sheldon?
Cultivating awareness of the problems. I don't know.
No, it's good. I mean, by the way, as like a great hack, and this is like to anybody who's thinking about going to business school, I'll give you a great hack. If you're ever in a class and you get cold called and you wonder what the answer is, look at the syllabus and see what the topic of the class is. Chances are that's the end. Right? So what's interesting is, what's fascinating to this discussion is the observable behavior was they delayed decisions. The most spectacular architects took longer to decide.
Really?
And what McKinnon found was they opened themselves up to new input and new ideas, new information by not deciding on the form or the design or whatever, right?
So they're letting it percolate a little in their
going back to this idea of incubation, right?
Yes, yeah.
And if you think about problem solving, and especially creativity and breakthrough thinking as effectively a question of problem solving, what you need is you need to give yourself time to consider the problem. And going back to this question of where do you start? You asked me, where do you start? Well, one thing is an awareness of problems. The other thing is, does anybody have any time? Does anybody have any ability to consider a problem? If not, forget about it, And in today's day and age, right, where this kind of ever increasing efficiency and productivity emphasis, what if you were to go on a college campus and you see two young men just strolling, moseying, not even walking. Walking implies purpose. They were moseying, laughing. What would you say? You'd say they're not working, And what if I told you that they're actually Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky reinventing the field of psychology and economics as we know it? That's a true story. They were known for taking these long, ambling, laughing walks. And yet when Amos Tversky was asked, how did you and Kahneman devise such incredible experiments that redefined our understanding of psychology? This is what Amos Tversky said. He said, the secret to doing good research, and you could replace the word research with work, I think, is to always be a little underemployed. You waste years by not being able to waste hours. And I think there's something very profound there, that he realized the great ideas came to them in the context of a relationship, in the context of these walks, not by sitting, focusing harder, but by working differently. And I think increasingly we need permission to work differently. We need language to work differently. Those are kind of initial conditions, I'd say, for if you want a practice of idea flow to really thrive, you need some of those initial conditions.
That's perfect. So with that, I love this, right? And that really stood out to me, that quote in the book too, because I've always kind of, we're so trained to be productive and efficient and all these things that you just feel guilty every time you're not
Totally
according to the rules accomplishing something, right? And so I love that aspect of it, because that's really how I work anyways. Like my brothers have always made fun of me because I'm kind of slow about stuff. And my wife, she does too. Like anything I do, I'm like meticulously doing it and kind of just slowly. I get it from my dad. It's just built in, right? Like,
don't apologize. Don't apologize.
But so to that point though, what do you guys do to kind of combat the schooling and all of what has been ingrained in us since childhood to be efficient? Because I think that's been my trouble with my team, is I'll get into this room with my core people and say, hey, we're going to have an idea session. And then they always just start to, and I know it takes training and practice, right? Which is what we're working on. But what do you guys do to combat that? From your approach is like, hey, you guys are going to have this mentality that immediately you want to come up with a solution and go down that road.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing is, people don't believe it till they see it, right? So how can we give them an experience that illustrates the point, right? So like classic example, something very easy to do is you say, okay, everybody think of a problem you're trying to solve right now, right? And you give people time. I actually have a chat bot I can share with you. People can do this on their own, because I do it myself, right? And I need kind of external, the facilitator needs facilitation, right? So I use a chat bot myself. But you say, okay, what's the problem you're trying to solve right now? And then you go, okay, great. What's the obvious answer? What's the thing that you probably will do? You're like, what's in your mind? This is the right answer. Great. Now just humor me for a minute. I'm going to rapid fire ask you a series of questions.
Yeah.
And if you're a listener, you can just do this right now. So write down what your question is, push pause, until you get your question, and then write down what's your obvious answer, and then push pause, write down, by the way, these pauses should take like 10 seconds, right? And then you say, okay, next question. What's the opposite of that obvious answer? Total opposite. Then you say, wait, but that's a stupid idea. I don't care. Write it down. No problem. Okay, great. Okay. Does that make you think of anything? Write it down if it makes you think of something. Okay, great. Next question. What's your favorite tech company? Okay, how would Amazon solve the problem? How would Apple solve the problem? How would Salesforce solve the problem? Okay, great. What's your favorite restaurant? Okay, how would Chick-fil-A solve the problem? How would Olive Garden solve the problem? That's mine, right? Okay, what's your favorite celebrity? How would Beyonce solve the problem? How would Taylor Swift solve the problem? Who's your favorite athlete? Who's your favorite celebrity? You see what I'm doing, right? I'm just mashing up. Arthur Kessler said creativity is the collision of apparently unrelated frames of reference. And all I'm doing is I'm forcing some collisions here, right? But then, hey, who's your best friend from high school? What would they tell you to do? Hey, if you could break the law and you wouldn't be punished, what would you do? Okay, does that make you think of something that's reasonable? Right. And now I go, okay, great. You just wrote down, if you push pause in the podcast or in the room, you just wrote down 11 different potential solutions. Some of them are absurd. Some of them are wacky, but there's a couple that you go, that's kind of interesting. Now I'm going to ask you a question. Circle the idea that you think you should try. And then you just get a show of hands. How many of you circled the first idea?
All of them.
Exceptionally few.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
And I go, wait, okay, so 10 minutes ago, you all had a problem and you had what you thought was the right answer. And with 10 minutes of wacky prompts, you came up with a better answer? That's interesting. What do you think would happen if we took 10 more minutes, right? What do you think would happen if we took 10 minutes to maybe focus on the same problem together? There's a series of like very simple exercises. You know, another one of my favorites from my buddy Dan Klein, who's the head of the Stanford Improvisers. He does a great activity called Oh Good, where everybody gets a gift, right? I did this I was at a conference in Georgia last week. It was super fun. But
Nice.
basically, yeah, people say, oh, good. You know, and you get a gift. So here, we'll do this right now. Okay. This is just real time. If you're a listener, you're hearing Jeff and Sheldon get their minds blown. Okay. But so we're going to do it. We're going to do it together. So you guys find a gift in your nearby vicinity. Okay. Something that you can give to me or to one another.
Okay. I got it.
Got it? Okay. So now here's the rule. We're going to give each other gifts. And then the only rule is when you receive the gift, you have to say, oh, good. And then say why it's like the thing that you were wanting. So Jeff, give me a gift first.
Okay. Here's this yo-yo.
Oh, good. I was looking for something to get like mindless distraction while I was thinking about a problem later. That's awesome. Thanks so much. Hey, Sheldon, I've got these Batman sunglasses that I bought at a convenience store.
Oh, good. Mine are broken, and I was needing some awesome shades for my next trip.
Excellent. Now, Sheldon, give Jeff a gift.
I'm going to give you this fidget toy that my son 3D printed.
Oh, good. That way I can switch out my pen for something more exciting to fidget with.
Wow. Okay. Now, so we could talk about that, but let's just stop there. And now what I want you to do is look for something on your desk or in your nearby vicinity that's objectively not good, that's bad, or that's not desirable. You got it?
Yeah.
Okay. So now we're going to give each other gifts, and here's the rules. Okay. So it's a little bit different this time. Now we're going to give each other a gift. We'll go in the same order. And when you receive the gift, what I want you to do is say, oh, good. And then say why it's the exact thing that you were wanting. Notice the rules are no different. Okay. So Jeff, give me a gift.
Here is my used napkin. Here you go.
Oh, good. My computer screen is kind of wobbly and I need something to put underneath it to stabilize it a little bit. Let's see. Sheldon, I've got this pencil whose eraser has been worn down to a nub.
Oh, good. I need something to whittle with.
Oh, okay. Very good. Now you give Jeff one.
Oh, I feel bad because it's almost the same. I was going to give you this pencil that my son's chewed on, so there's bite marks all over it, Jeff.
Oh, good. I actually don't have a pencil here and I need something to draw with. So
Okay. So what do you notice there? Which scenario had more creativity?
The second one.
The second one.
Okay. Yeah. Most people find that to be the case. And yet it's when we got given the bad gift. And what does that teach us? A bad gift, it's not bad, actually. It can be great. There is no such thing as a bad gift. And you could also say there's no such thing as a bad idea. It's only what you do with it. And the genius in the room, and you could say to your team, Jeff, in this like alternative universe, ordinarily the genius is the person who can see mistakes, right? They're the person who can see why something's not going to work. But in this like alternative universe, the genius is the person who can see something that's amazing that nobody else can see. Possibility that no one can see, right? But all that say, like you get the idea. You can do simple things that, I mean, we just took 5 minutes of runtime out of the podcast, but you start to see, oh, I can see and then can you think about a time when you gave somebody something that you thought was bad that ended up being great? It's like, yeah, actually I can, right? And you start to, the problem is we have very, very fixed rules for what work looks like and for what productive outputs look like. And so just using simple exercises to help redefine what does a genius look like right now? What kind of attitude should I be showing up with? And really simple things that can have a demonstrably better impact very quickly. And then you go, well, now you want to take a little bit longer ride with me? You're going to suspend disbelief, just like you go see an Arnold Schwarzenegger movie and you suspend disbelief. What if we suspend disbelief for a couple of hours? What could we do? Right. And we'll get back to reality and gravity and, and budgets and all that, but let's just suspend this sense of, because because the default is this deep sense of criticism and disbelief, and that doesn't get us to anywhere we haven't imagined yet.
We love that. It reminds me a little bit of this other concept we're talking a lot about was 10x goals, right? Is setting impossible goals with the same idea in mind, because it forces you to think differently, to flip the script of, okay, if it's possible, then I'm not stretching, I'm not growing, I'm not changing the world around me or the way that I approach the world. So I love that. I love all this. That's a super fun activity to do. I will do that with the team. That sounds fantastic.
Well, and what you want to demonstrate is, Steve Jobs would have lunch with Sir Johnny Ive every day. And you think about that killer combo. I mean, you think about Steve Jobs. Nobody, when they heard Steve Jobs' name, is going, that doofus. Nobody listening to this podcast. You may disagree with his management style or his personality or whatever, but you don't disagree that he was a creative genius, right? And you go, okay,
right.
Oh, he disrupted categories. He delighted many customers. He redefined industries. How did he do it? And thankfully, we actually have kind of written records of that. And Johnny Ive, is quite a reliable, narrator. And he said every day, Steve Jobs would say to me, hey, Johnny, you want to hear a dopey idea? And he said most of the time his ideas were pretty dopey. In fact, sometimes they were truly terrible, but every once in a while, they take the out of the room and leave us breathless in wonder, right? As only Sir Johnny Ive can say. But the point is...
yeah, it's like his nice voice.
The point is, he was modeling sharing bad ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And what he knew was if you create space where bad ideas are welcome, dopey ideas, as he would say, if you create that space, every once in a while, there's really wait, but that's actually not that crazy, Steve. What if we did this, right? And there's real magic that unfolds because what people, we've talked, at length, or I think the majority of this conversation has been about this question of volume.
Right.
How do you get more ideas? The other thing I would say that's critical is variation.
Yeah.
And why do I draw this line here? Like volume's about, from like the y-axis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Variation's the x-axis. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to vary beyond the norm, right? Like a really great idea is like 2 or 3 or 4 standard deviations to the right. What's challenging is most people want an asymmetric distribution. I'm going to lop off the whole left side. I'm only going to have great ideas. And that's not how it works, right? Why do we do good? As an exercise? Why do we have zany left field prompts like, what would your high school best friend do? Because we know that what we need is variation. We actually want to be pushing the standard deviation out, and you're increasing the likelihood of not only good ideas, but also really bad ideas. But if your goal is no bad ideas, then you also get no good ideas. If your goal is a small handful of really great ideas, you're probably going to have about as many really stinkers too, but that's okay, right? Dopey is the price of delightful. And you basically get to choose, do you want a distribution that's super broad, but includes really breakthrough? Or do you want a super narrow distribution of a bunch of ordinary crap that's neither delightful nor dopey? And those are kind of the choices you have. You get to choose which distribution you want.
Well, and I love that because that's the other thing that you guys say in there that I've been reminding myself is I'm a terrible judge of what a good idea is, right? It's like you didn't say that word verbatim, but that's how I phrase it in my head, right? I'm like, okay, I just have to tell myself every time I'm going into an idea session, I'm a terrible judge of what a good idea is, right? And so to just write it all down, because I love the idea flow practice you give, because you guys give a great tool in there for personal practice of this principle. So to get your brain, and it's almost like an artist who sketches every morning, right? Just does a doodle to stretch their muscles. Well, this is stretching your idea muscles. Totally. Can you walk them through that really quick? Like those steps to practicing idea flow personally every day?
Yeah, I mean, the simple thing is, realizing it starts the night before, So we call it seed, spawn, and then, solve. But before you go to bed, I think John Steinbeck once said, there's very few problems that aren't resolved once the committee of sleep has convened. And so what you want to do is before you go to bed, you actually want to give your subconscious a problem that you're working on, and we make the mistake of, trying to be compartmentalized, right? We shut things off, right? And what we recommend is you're already going to be tossing and turning anyway, probably. Why not consider the problem in a lighthearted way? And don't push yourself to be solving it. Just bring it to mind and then go to sleep and allow the subconscious to do what it's, uniquely gifted and equipped to do, which is free associate without judgment, right? And then in the morning, while you're fresh, before you are, diving into email or Slack or text, whatever, take time to write down 10 ideas to the problem that you considered the night before. And if you get in this habit of daily jotting down, going for volume, giving yourself kind of space, what you realize is you're actually kind of short-circuiting some of the cognitive biases. Like one cognitive bias that's deeply held is called the Einstein effect, where you fixate on one answer. And the tendency of a human is to fixate on a single answer. And by pushing yourself to a quota, to this idea quota on a daily basis, you're not just affecting the time of practice. Your practice has implications in the rest of your life, right? It's not just about solving that problem, but about solving the cognitive bias that is the real problem.
You're training your brain for variation and quantity and not fixating, like you said.
That's right. Exactly. You're kind of rewiring yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful practice. I've just had so much fun with it. And the other thing that I've been applying, and it's funny because I think you guys share how, hey, you can approach this in almost anything, but it really does. It has given me so much confidence approaching any problem that used to bother me, right? Like problems that you're just like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to solve. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to solve that. But when Ideaflow comes into play, it's so much more fun to look at any problem and say like, all I got to hit this with is a bunch of solutions, right? It's like,
yes,
let's just try and get
about it. And it's taking that practice mindset. It's like athletes. I don't know if you guys played sports in high school or college, whatever, but like we all have this athletic. If we played sports, I watch my little sister do it. She's a volleyball player. You go to the grocery store, she grabs a jug of milk out of the refrigerator. You know what she does? She does curls on the way back to the cart, right? And you don't have to tell her, hey, time to build your muscles. No, it's like if you're an athlete, you're always kind of looking for opportunities. Well, to an innovator, you're always, just like you said, Jeff, you're looking for opportunity. Oh, fun. I can flex the muscle. Like these are like gallon, milk jug curls. And the stuff that used to be bothersome is just fodder for the practice.
That's a great example. I loved it because like dinner time, right? We're always like debating, like, what are we gonna eat for dinner? Yeah, now I'm like, sweet guys, throw out ideas. All the kids, I'm just like, bam, let's hit this thing, right? We're gonna have 30 ideas, and I love it because it flips the approach. Because normally you're like, what's in the fridge? What can we have time to make? Yada yada yada. But if you come with like, here's 30 ideas of possible dinner options, right? Then you're like, hey, okay, now what's in the fridge, right? Now, like, it makes it a lot easier. So that's cool. Kind of fun.
That's great.
That way. But the one question that keeps coming up as I introduce this concept to people and share them the book, and they're, I'm sharing concepts. I really love your mall example in there. For some reason, that one stuck out to me, like with the wine garden that they tried to build. Right. Kind of like what would have happened, and then what actually did, because we were there to help them realize, like,
thankfully,
try this out first before you spend millions of dollars building out this wine garden. But what people come back to me with, and maybe you pointed it out a second ago, is, okay, say now I have 200, 300, 1,000 ideas, whatever the number is. They're like, how do I refine and winnow down to the ones I want to try? And I'm like, well, I think it's probably up to you, but I was like, I'll ask Jeremy his approach to this question, because I'm sure he gets this from people who listen to this concept.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is you don't want to prematurely select, and you don't want to, because as you said earlier, you're a bad judge of the quality of ideas. So the key is like a portfolio. You want to run several experiments in parallel. So, to go back to the restaurant, waiting time example, what's way better than opening a merch shop in the front of a store is opening a merch shop in parallel to a GameStop, in parallel to a appetizer discount program, in parallel to a, we'll call you back, in parallel to the longer you wait, the cheaper your meal is, right? Like, I mean, restaurants got 200 locations, try several things, right? And then judge them against the same criteria. Which one reduces the churn the most, right?
Mhm.
And so the approach is actually the important thing, not having the answer, but having the approach to discover the answer. And so ultimately, very few people can try thousands of things,
Mhm.
but you can try way more than one for sure if you get experimental and scrappy and cheap and fast. So the first thing is kind of reducing the cost of an experiment. But then once you realize that, oh, an experiment can be super cheap and super fast, well, then what are you trying and what are you measuring? What's your outcome variable? And for a lot of
Mhm.
people, even just getting specific on outcome variable is enormously helpful, meaning
Yeah.
what variable are we trying to affect here? If you even state that, get a long way there, right? And then
Because
commission,
that's coming back to your original problem of like,
right? Yeah. How is it manifested?
yeah.
Like how do we know the wait is a problem? Well, one out of every two people who hears there's a 30-minute wait walks away and we lose their business. Okay,
Mhm.
great. Okay, so the outcome variable is walk away rate, right? And the only question is what affects the walk away rate the most, right? And then a lot of times when you do that, by the way, then that actually fuels ideation. How else
Mhm.
could we affect the walk away rate? Oh, we run after people in the parking lot and tell them I don't know, right? You can figure it out, right? But the point is commissioning a portfolio of experiments that are cheap and scrappy and fast. And then the last thing I'd say is, what are you interested in learning about? If there's no part of you whose interest is piqued or whose curiosity is piqued, as I've said before, if you don't care, don't bother, because there are going to be so many obstacles and so many kind of, black eyes and, bloody noses on the way to actually implementing an innovation.
Mhm.
If you don't actually care to see the impact or the result, then you should move on from that idea, right? So your own kind of enthusiasm is a good indicator of whether you're going to have the energy required to see something to implementation.
That's awesome. One of the things that I basically stole directly from the book is we've started doing on our whiteboard in the back office of our store, right? We run a jewelry store anyway. And we've put up prompts for the different, like two or three different things we're trying to have solutions for, ideas for, because in the past we've always just been like, hey, everybody, like you said earlier, like have an idea, share your
Right.
ideas with us. And it's like, in accordance to what? Like what problem
Right.
are we trying to solve? So now
Right.
having the prompts was beautiful because we have a few prompts that we've selected of like, how might we create a better delivery experience of our jewelry, right? It's like how might we something like that, right? Maybe that one's a little bit canned, but you get the idea. So we have a few of those that we're running with now. So we put those on the board, and then on the Slack channel, our people will text in ideas whenever they think of something. Bam, bam, bam. And so it's been awesome though, because I was like, well, we'll see how it goes. But you're giving people not only a prompt, but you're giving them permission to share
Right.
ideas, which is always something we've tried to do, is create like an empowering environment. And so we've only been doing it for a couple of weeks, but we already have several things we're going to try out, right? To test out.
So to me, one of the things that you should be careful of, Jeff, is like somebody asked me the other day on a other podcast, well, when are there too many ideas? And I'd say when there's too little action. And so to me, one of the ways to pour fuel on the fire of Ideaflow is to commission experiments. Like if you're the leader, is like somebody posts something to Slack, say, cool, here's $50, try it. Like they say, oh, what if we brought them flowers with the thing? It's like for you, almost not totally randomly, but to be like, yeah, buy the flowers, I'll reimburse you when you get back to the office. People go, oh, wait, like for real? Oh, like we're doing this? There's something that happens when they go, wait, I just put an idea out there and Jeff already told me that he'll pay $18 for flowers. And then, but then, so it's like, that's great. You resource it, right? That, which is like a trivial investment, for a $10,000 necklace or whatever, right?
Right,
Okay.
right.
Well, now what's Jeff measuring? Well, let's talk about outcome variables. Are they active on social media? Do they send us a handwritten thank you card? Do they recommend their best friend come buy jewelry? Like, who knows, right? And a lot of times you don't have to necessarily get it right, but even having that question of like, how would we know if this improved the delivery experience is a really valuable exercise, right? And then what are the 5 or 6 things we could be monitoring? And then probably if you get your feedback loops there and you just take like that one thing as like a playground for idea flow, then what you'll find is, whoa, you know what we never would have imagined? You know how it manifested? I can't even come up with and they've offered to do an in-kind trade of their horses, like I'm just, saying something totally absurd, right? But it's like, oh, we never would have thought to measure, agricultural exchange. Now we should measure that, right? But the point is, you got in the game of people have become aware of what are the variables we're even monitoring. Maybe the most valuable thing is something that you would never think to measure prior to the encouragement to think about measuring something, right?
Yeah.
And so all that to say, just like taking a chunk, like going back maybe to the beginning of the conversation as we start to wrap here, is do something. And what most people are looking for is the perfect thing, the perfect project. I'm just waiting and I just need a policy and I just need no. I love what you've done there of how might we, you've put a few out and then you've put the feelers out there, commission a few things and then start the conversation about what worked. How do we know? What are we going to try next? And that's what's going to kind of grease the skids for this sort of behavior to start to spill over into other parts of the business. Because the delivery experience is one thing, but like, what about the pickup experience? And then what about the supplier experience? And then what about our, and all of a sudden different people who are involved in different aspects. And what about our employee experience, right? And you start to go, well, what's the flowers equivalent for somebody who's celebrating 5 years of working for us? Ooh, what can we do, right? And all of a sudden these tendrils start to kind of crawl across the organization, but it actually comes back to you as a leader just commissioning really simple, scrappy action and then attuning the team to, is it working? And what else should we be trying to work on?
I have one really tactical question for you, Jeremy. In this scenario that Jeff just gave out, what would you do to help encourage his employees to not self-filter the ideas of, because I'm in their mind, they're only sharing the good ideas that they come up with on the Slack channel, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, just actually ask for stupid ideas.
Yeah.
It's really easy.
It was the rules. You're like, the rules are good, bad, ugly, right? Like we want them all.
Yeah. It's got to be, like what would we do if you had $1 million or give different constraints, right? What would you do if you had unlimited budget? What should we not do? What would or you could like the cognitive bias, flip it around. What would totally ruin the delivery experience? Right. And so you can kind of play some games there, but I think that's a very astute question, Sheldon, that what you don't want is people filtering too much. And so what you do want is you want to be clear. What we're looking for is not good ideas. It's all ideas. One way you can scrum it is like you require everybody's got to have 10 and at least, and maybe you have like a wacky quota. At least 30% of the ideas have to be totally wacky. And somebody is punished if they don't come up with 10 or if at least 3 aren't wacky, right? And then what you can do is you can have a game where like everybody's got to grab somebody else's wacky idea and actually make it awesome. And then all of a sudden you show, wow, we never would have thought of the awesome thing if Sheldon hadn't taken Jeff's wacky idea and made it great. What's the value of the wacky idea? It led us to the awesome thing that we never would have thought of, right?
Well, that's great. I'll do this with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, pencil.
Exactly.
Well, this is just invaluable, honestly. So great. And I love seeing your approach to even the things that I've been trying to implement has been really helpful because you just do this a lot, right? So it's like, man, you got a lot of this, your mind's working in that realm and it's super helpful.
Well, I'd be happy to, I'll be eager to hear, Jeff, if you like, here's what I would say, the ticket to the next conversation. I was on a podcast the other day. He goes, we got to talk again. Okay. Well, what's the ticket? To me, like, not that you're asking to talk again or anything, but
I am. Definitely.
The ticket to the next conversation is, I want to hear what are 3 things the team tries to improve the delivery experience. And like, what was the worst, what was the best and why?
Love it.
And if you have those things, I would be delighted. Obviously we just have a phone call, or we could do another podcast or whatever. But to me, it's actually, or maybe we have a call with your team, right? I'm happy to talk to your team as well. That'd be super fun. But to me, I am personally, just like to speak personally too, I am incredibly motivated by people who are wanting to work differently. and people are wanting to implement this stuff. It's like that to me. It's like, that's my addiction, is actually working with people who go, no, I want to work differently. It's like, great. Well, I want to work with you.
Well, that's what we want. So
yeah.
That's always what I want. I'm always like, how could we do this differently? There's got to be a better way. It's my life.
That's great. That sense of low grade annoyance or frustration is a great indicator that there's an opportunity for innovation.
Well, in the whole jewelry industry, so I've been in it now 8 years. My brother brought me in because we were doing a bunch of other stuff on the side. And he's like, I'm taking over the business. I want a business partner. Jumped in and I found my space there, which is to just try and innovate and make this space better than it is, because it's all antiquated, right? It's a very old industry. Yeah. Well, I shouldn't say very old. It's an older industry and it's just stuck in a rut. It's got, I mean, they're living on the same model, right, for the last 150 years. So wow, it's something that I think has a lot of room for innovation and growth possibilities. So it's pretty fun.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I look forward to hearing what you implement, and if I can be of service or assist in any way, please.
Hey, that would be fantastic. Thank you so much, Jeremy. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise, guys. All right,
Jeremy.
Be good, y'all.
Okay, have a great day.
You too. Bye.
Thank you for listening. This is an awesome episode with Jeremy Utley. Just been talking about this for a while, right? But after talking with Jeremy, this has been on my list of books to get to. It's now going to get to the actually listen to portion of my list. It was really good. Anyway, thank you for listening. And as always, you can go to show notes if you need links to his book, anything like that. And again, please leave us a review.
Don't forget about Magic Monday, guys.
Magic Monday.
Yes. We've got a new email we're sending out every week, and we want to help you launch your week with some magic. It's called Magic Monday. It's literally a 1 to 2 minute read. All of our family has subscribed to it. Friends, neighbors.
I have a sister that's now subscribed, not just my mom. Yeah. So
we want you next to jump on. So far, it's been really fun writing it. It's short. You're going to love it. Kick off your week with some Monday motivation. Let's call it that.
It's going to show up in your inbox, not Monday morning, but kind of like Monday right before lunches, after you've kind of deluged the inbox and, the new things you have to do for the day, kind of settle through that. And you're like, okay, I need a little bit of pick me up.
Yeah, because everyone else is sending out Friday newsletters. Fridays are already great. We wanted to add a little magic to Monday. True. We think you're going to enjoy it. Go subscribe. We also give you 20% off our course if you subscribe. Just follow the show notes or go to our website, habitmasters.com. It's on the front page. You guys are great. Thanks so much. It's time to start living your best life.